Greetings friends, and welcome to my Aggressive Style Warrior Tanking Guide 3.0. This guide will be split into different sections, and I will be covering every aspect of the warrior job: tanking meta, cross-class abilities, equipment and stats, then finally, ability synergies and rotations. I will also be making updates to this guide as more content is released or changed for the whole 3.x series. The information in this video is aimed mostly towards characters at max level doing in-game content. However, it can still be a useful tool while leveling. My style of tanking is extremely aggressive, leading to high damage output while still maintaining all of my tanking capabilities. This is a playstyle that I have grown accustomed to and is achieved by min-maxing stats, aiming for HP thresholds, stance dancing, and making the correct choices to maximize and to mitigate damage when the situations arise. I have played Warrior for quite some time now and believe I have optimized the job to the best of my abilities. Do not think that just because you are a tank, you are incapable of producing high amounts of damage while tanking. Warrior is a tank class capable of high DPS but requiring a high skill level to master. This job revolves around synergizing your cooldowns to improve their effectiveness. This creates offensive cooldowns being used in a defensive way, while defensive cooldowns being used in an offensive way. The effective floor is much lower on Warrior when compared to the other tanking classes, simply meaning if you suck shit and your playstyle is garbage, it will definitely show and others will laugh at you. However, the ceiling for Warrior is higher when compared to other tanking classes. Again, simply meaning if you're a badass Viking warrior, then your mitigation will be spot on and your damage output will be through the roof. Before I get into the actual warrior job, I want to take a second and touch on Final Fantasy XIV's tanking meta. The way you tank in Final Fantasy XIV is completely different than a lot of other MMOs. This game is all about mechanic damaging abilities, or tank busters. The encounters in this game are very scripted, and the bosses will do massive damage on the tank only for a second of in short predictable bursts. This is mechanic damage. With this meta, this allows tanks and healers to do a lot more DPS than your traditional MMO. This also makes RNG based mitigation like parry and block less valuable unless it is extremely high percentage. What I mean by this is if a boss is not hitting you with mechanic damaging abilities, then you are just receiving auto attacks, fluff damage. When the boss uses mechanic damaging abilities, you mitigate them with a cooldown. You do not rely on parry or block to save you. If you do, you will set yourself up to fail, and stacking such stats are a waste of optimizing your character. Not to mention, there are a lot of magic damage based attacks in this game that parry or block will not do anything against. If your healers cannot heal you through auto attacks, then unfortunately, you just need to find new healers. Cooldowns are everything in this game, and I believe they are not only the key to mitigating damage, but pushing limits and doing damage as a tank. When you have the mentality that cooldowns are not just used for defensive, but offensive as well, that is when your damage output will increase. There are always exceptions to this. Sometimes you will need your tanking stance and a cooldown to survive an attack. But in a lot of cases, a cooldown by itself or simply your tanking stance is more than enough to survive the attack. I will make one thing clear: I am not trying to promote tanking without your tank stance or compensating for your tank stance in some way. That would be stupid. While tanking, you should always either have your tank stance or a cooldown going to compensate. This meta is all about finding out patterns and proper cooldown usage, so be open to all possibilities and experiment for yourself to find what works best for you. One more thing I want to say about the tanking meta. Since the expansion 3.0 Warrior not only has the highest burst aggro generation, but also the highest sustained. This is going off of optimal DPS rotations based on all three tanks, main tank and off tanking. The reason for this aggro meta change is because Unchained Berserk making it the most bursty, and the overall aggro generation is going to be Storm's Eye and Butcher's Block. No other tank does the full enmity combo for maximum damage except Warrior. So with this being said, watch your aggro when off tanking. Okay, so now I want to go into cross-class abilities that are available and the ones I personally use. Some are pretty straightforward, while others being more of a personal preference. These are the ones I use. Provoke. Provoke is a must-have for in-game raiding where tank swaps are required. Tank swaps are built into this game, and most encounters are designed for two tanks. It is also very nice to have Vogue for an unfortunate death of a tank or snap aggro. This ability will put your threat +1 above the person with the highest aggro, so be sure to only use Vogue if you're following it up with the second or third attack of your threat combo, or you'll run the risk of losing hate. Convalescence. This ability is amazing. Convalescence increases HP recovery from incoming heals by 20% for 20 seconds, with a 2-minute cooldown. While this ability doesn't synergize with self-healing capabilities, it works wonders on being topped up and shield-type healing. It also helps healers catch up in raid damage situations by topping you up with AoE healing instead of single target. Internal release. Increases crit chance by 10% for 15 seconds with a 60-second cooldown. This ability is a must-have not only for damage, but it also synergizes well with the warrior's self-healing abilities. If used properly, this offensive cooldown can be used in a defensive way by pairing it up with Bloodbath or Inner Beast. Now those three I believe are mandatory, but these last two are personal preference, each bringing their own upsides. Here is what I use for my last two. Flash. Flash increases enmity by all surrounding targets. This ability is on the global cooldown, but does not break your combo, and it requires mana instead of TP. I really like this ability because you can use it while pacified and without having to have a target. This also makes grouping up adds very simple when Overpower can't hit all the targets. And the last cross-class ability I use is Awareness. Awareness nullifies chance of suffering critical damage for 15 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. Over time, this ability has gotten better and better. This cooldown is really good to pair up with Raw Intuition if tanking multiple mobs from all angles. Certain encounters have extremely high crit chance or auto crits, making this move really valuable. While not always the best cooldown, it does cap the damage you receive, and it's always good to have the option of pairing this ability up with Raw Intuition. Here are the cross-class abilities I do not use. Savage Blade, for obvious reasons. Featherfoot. Dodging really isn't a thing in Final Fantasy XIV outside of dungeons, which makes this move pretty useless in raid situations where mobs cannot miss you. If the meta were to shift, where dodging big attacks become viable, then this move would also increase in value, but until then, it's pretty much useless. Haymaker, again, for obvious reasons. Mantra. Mantra increases HP recovery via Curie magic by 5% for self and nearby party members for 15 seconds. The cooldown is 2 minutes. I don't really like this ability. The extra healing is fine, but the long cooldown for merely 5% is really bad. This is a viable option though, because extra healing does matter, but I don't personally use this ability. Let DPS cross-class this. The reason I say that is because DPS cross-class abilities are a lot more straightforward, having only 3 to 4 options and usually taking this because there is nothing more available. Second Wind. This is a viable option and one I used to use for a while back in 2.x series. Second Wind instantly restores own HP for a cure potency of 450. Potency varies with attack power, and the cooldown is 2 minutes. So this means the more strength you have, the higher the heal, which synergizes with having a high strength build. This ability is pretty good, but I don't personally use it because of the long cooldown for such a weak heal in comparison to Equilibrium. I also believe Awareness is the better choice because preventing even one crit is more damage mitigated than damage healed by Second Wind. Okay, since gear is constantly changing, I'm not going to go into too much. However, I will say that ideally for tanks, you'll want crafted accessories of the highest item level. Meld these with Vit or Strength and as many secondaries as possible. With each new patch, I will release an updated video on the current crafted accessories and different ways to possibly meld them. But for now, I'm just going to go into what type of stats you should aim for. Obviously, this is my personal playstyle and is not the only way to gear your character, but given the tanky meta, I feel this is the most optimal way. I want to go over the main stats first. Even though accuracy is technically a secondary, I still consider it a main stat because without this, you are unable to do certain content. Accuracy. Accuracy increases your chance to hit and is needed for in-game raids. Once the appropriate accuracy cap has been reached, all extra accuracy is completely wasted. The amount of accuracy will always be changing with each new patch or piece of content that is introduced. I will update this part through annotations when new caps are discovered. Vitality. Each point increases your HP. You'll want this above all else to a certain threshold. Warrior is a tank class, not a DPS, but that doesn't mean you should have more Vit than necessary. Extra Vit after HP threshold severely diminishes in value, simply meaning once you have enough HP to survive mechanic damaging abilities and the auto attack that follows comfortably, then you don't need any more Vit. It is a waste. What is the HP threshold, you ask? There is no definite number. The number is based on the skill of the player, the encounter, and the healers. So the number will vary slightly from group to group and person to person. However, do not think that you need to stack all vitality to compensate for your healers. Healers have a responsibility here as well, and if they can't do at least an average job, then you just simply need to find new healers. Carrying people is not an option. This goes the same for the tank position. Don't go head first into an encounter with extremely low HP expecting a healer to spam heal you. If you do this, you are a moron and deserve to die during the encounter. Finding these numbers and finding these HP thresholds require simple testing and familiarizing yourself with the encounter as you learn them. The more you are comfortable, the less Vit needed. To give you an example of how to find these thresholds, personally, I maintained Ravana X in full slaying gear at around I-178. This put me roughly around 16k in Defiance, so for me, around 16k, no more than 16.5k HP was my threshold. I used cooldowns appropriately and split blinding blades while stance dancing. I also solo blinding blades with a cooldown and Defiance, so to sum it up, Vit is not only the most important stat, but the most delicate in terms of finding a good balance. Strength. This increases damage dealt. Strength is amazing for Warrior because it synergizes with almost everything the Warrior job is trying to do. Forms of mitigation comes from Strength, as well as self-healing and damage. This stat you want to prioritize after HP thresholds are met. Strength will never see diminishing returns when balancing it properly with Vit. Once HP thresholds are met, go all Strength all the time. Now for the secondary DPS stats. All are pretty equal in value. Some jobs may favor other stats slightly, but as far as the scaling goes, all are pretty equal. Skill speed. Skill speed is insanely important. Skill speed reduces your GCD, making you able to attack faster. In addition to this, it also increases the amount of damage done per dot tick. As a warrior, during your Berserk window, it is extremely vital to fit in 9 attacks. To achieve this, you want to aim for around 450 skill speed. This number varies slightly depending on latency, so you may need a little more or a little less depending on your connection. Critical hit rate. This stat is pretty self-explanatory. Crit affects your crit chance percentage as well as the crit multiplier. Crit raises the effective ceiling in terms of damage output. This stat really helps with a powerful self-healing capabilities, so it really does double duty on a warrior by increasing damage and tanking capabilities. Determination. This stat affects the amount of damage done through weapon skills and auto attacks. This stat raises the effective floor in terms of damage output with no RNG involved. This stat is amazing and you'll definitely want a lot of it. Parry. Whenever you parry a physical attack, the damage will be reduced by a base rate of 20%. Stacking this stat will increase the damage mitigation percentage and the rate of which it triggers. This stat is amazing when it activates. However, there are several extremely impacting downsides to this stat which make it unviable in my opinion. Parry only works on physical attacks, and in addition to this, the tanking meta calls for two tanks, with many mechanics dictating a tank swap or splitting damage between the two. Parry does absolutely nothing when you are off tanking anything. It also scales extremely bad and by far the worst of the secondaries, so point for point you are losing effectiveness of your character by stacking this. I would not recommend this stat. The tanking meta makes this parry extremely bad with very little upsides. Parry is also the last thing to trigger. The game first checks for a critical attack, then a block, and then a parry. So if the attack hitting you is a critical hit or blocked, parry is absolutely useless because it never actually gets to that step. Perhaps if there were a shift in the meta or the scaling were better, I could definitely see this stat being really good. However, currently, as it stands, this is trash tier. My stat priority order is like this: accuracy to cap, vit to the appropriate threshold, strength, then skill speed, 450-ish, and then crit det. Some secondary priorities will vary depending on your job or the options available. These are what I personally use. However, I feel that all are pretty close in effectiveness, and after achieving the right vit, strength, skill speed, and accuracy balance, the crit and det should come naturally. However, with warriors having a higher crit chance with some abilities, I can see crit being slightly more effective than det simply based on the increase on crit multiplier. But at the end of the day, both crit and det are valuable. Okay, now for the heart of this video. I'm going to go into abilities, rotations, and the synergies between them. Warrior is all about synergizing abilities and cooldowns to improve their effectiveness. Using offensive cooldowns in a defensive way and vice versa will allow the warrior job to deal massive amounts of damage while tanking with amazing efficiency. First, you have your warrior's two stances, Defiance and Deliverance. Defiance. This stance is your tanking stance. When activated, it increases your maximum HP by 25%, incoming healing by 20%, and accuracy by 5%. This also lowers your damage by 25%, but allows you to gain stacks of Wrath, which can be used on certain abilities once 5 stacks have been achieved. Each stack will increase your parry chance by 2% as well. Going into Defiance is off the GCD, but has a 10-second recast timer that is shared with Deliverance. Activating Defiance also converts stacks of Abandon to Wrath, if any are available. This cannot be used with Deliverance. There is a big misconception with the way warriors tank. Warriors only gain the benefit of their tanking stance when they are at full HP or while being healed. If neither of these things are happening, then you are not actually taking advantage of Defiance. You do not simply assume that warriors will take less damage while in Defiance and not heal them. A warrior's tanking capabilities are triggered each time they are healed or at full HP. This doesn't mean warriors need more healing, but it does mean is that Defiance works very close with the heals they receive and heavily relies on the skill and coordination between the players. Defiance is a reflection of the healer's ability as well as the warrior. Deliverance. This is your DPS stance. When activated, it increases your overall damage by 5% and allows you to gain stacks of Abandon. These stacks can be used on certain abilities once 5 stacks have been achieved. Each stack of Abandon will increase your crit chance by 2%. Going into Deliverance is off the GCD and has a 10-second recast timer that is shared with Defiance. Deliverance also converts all stacks of Wrath into Abandon if available. Cannot be used with Defiance. These two stances are the things that separate Warrior from the other tanks. Switching between tank and DPS stance is key to maximizing your damage while maintaining your tanking capabilities. Later in this video, I will demonstrate the advantages of doing this. Stance dancing takes a lot of skill and requires constant attention of not only the boss and mechanics, but the stacks of wrath and abandon you gain as well. Being able to fully utilize this will separate you from the average player. I will now go into the different abilities gained from Defiance and Deliverance. Infuriate instantly gives you 5 stacks of Wrath or Abandon, whichever stance you are in at the time, and can be used in either stance. The cooldown is 1 minute. This ability is a toolbox and one of the best abilities a warrior has access to. It can be used for burst damage, value stacks, self-healing, or prepped mitigation. This is easily the most versatile ability on warrior, and making full use of this move is a must. In Defiance, you gain access to these abilities. Inner Beast delivers an attack with a potency of 300 and ignores the damage penalty of Defiance, absorbs 100% of the damage done as HP, and reduces incoming damage by 20% for 6 seconds. This ability is amazing. It accomplishes 2 things simultaneously, and it is also available for every mechanic damaging ability, provided you prepare for it. This is easily one of the best warrior abilities as well as tanking abilities in general. This does massive damage while not only healing but also reducing damage. IB really does double duty when it comes to tanking. Unchained nullifies the damage penalty inflicted by Defiance for 20 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. This ability is awesome and is both an offensive and defensive cooldown. Its offensive capabilities really shine when tanking or pulling the boss during the opener. It can also be used in a defensive way to allow full damage while stance dancing, simply meaning you can rotate this into your cooldown rotation when tanking with Deliverance. This basically turns Unchained into Defiance with no downsides, so you keep 100% damage uptime while maintaining your tanking capabilities. Steel Cyclone delivers an attack with a potency of 200 to all nearby enemies. This also ignores the damage penalty inflicted by Defiance. This ability is amazing for grouping adds and doing massive damage to everything around you. Another really good thing about Steel Cyclone is that it doesn't require a target and can be activated whenever. Now the abilities you gain in Deliverance. Cleave delivers an attack with a potency of 500. Well, I'm just going to show you a clip that sums up better than words how fucking badass this ability is. Okay, so now you know how awesome that move is. Decimate delivers an attack to all nearby enemies with a potency of 280. Like Steel Cyclone, this ability is awesome in the way that you don't have to target anything and can activate it whenever, in addition to doing massive damage to groups of enemies. Alright, I'll go into offensive and defensive cooldowns. Berserk increases attack power by 50% for 20 seconds, unable to use weapon skills for 5 seconds after effect ends. Also grants a Wrath or Abandon stack. Cooldown is 90 seconds. This is your main DPS cooldown, and oh my god, does it allow you to do a lot of damage. In addition to being an offensive cooldown, it can also be used defensively. It makes Bloodbath, IB, Second Wind, and Equilibrium so much better. The amount of self-healing that Zerk can provide is crazy good, and the stack it provides helps you power out stance abilities faster. This cooldown is stupid good and synergizes with almost every single warrior ability. Thrill of Battle increases maximum HP by 20% and restores the amount increased. Lasts for 20 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. This move is amazing and has multiple uses. You will typically want to save this ability for mechanic damage, making your HP pool ridiculously massive and able to soak the incoming attack. However, it can also be used as a heal when your HP is low. If stance dancing is appropriate, you can activate this ability while in Deliverance to essentially gain a Defiance-like effect without the damage penalty. Vengeance Reduces damage taken by 30% and delivers an attack with a potency of 50 every time you suffer physical damage for 15 seconds. The cooldown is 2 minutes. This also grants 1 stack of Wrath or Abandon, whichever stance you're in. This ability rocks and is personally my favorite cooldown in the game. The damage mitigation is amazing and the 50 potency attack is no joke. It is buffed by Maim, Berserk, Storm's Eye, and Bloodbath. The amount of damage and mitigation this ability provides is insane. The stack it also provides helps you power out abilities faster. Overall, amazing cooldown. Raw Intuition parries every attack taken from the front. All attacks taken from the flank or rear will result in critical damage. Lasts for 20 seconds with a 90-second cooldown. This ability will also give you a stack of Abandon or Wrath depending on your stance. This cooldown is crazy good when it comes to anything physical. Raw Intuition also lets you stand stance easier and also powers out stack abilities. If you are worried about being crit from the sides or back, you can pair this up with Awareness to make the cooldown even better. Equilibrium. This ability has 2 different functions. In Defiance, it restores self HP with a cure potency of 1200. In Deliverance, it restores 200 TP. The cooldown is 60 seconds. Wow. This ability is ridiculously good. The heal you get is really high and synergizes with Berserk, improving its effectiveness at almost double the rate. The TP restoration it provides is on par with cross-class Invigorate, making warriors never in need of TP. Equilibrium can be used for offensive and defensive purposes, and the low cooldown really puts this move over the top. Holmgang. Draws target towards you and binds both. Most attacks cannot reduce your HP below 1, lasts for 6 seconds, and the cooldown is 3 minutes. This ability is awesome and horrible at the same time. The bind and pull never works on enemies that matter, so it's really just a hindrance. The really amazing thing about this cooldown is that given the indestructible factor it provides, Holmgang's cooldown is somewhat low. 3 minutes is pretty short for an ability that lets you live through practically everything. I try to use this as a planned cooldown whenever I can. I think this is the best way to go about using this. You can pair this up with Equilibrium to make sure you don't die after it wears off and to help your healers out a bit. You can also use this as a save your ass at the last second kind of thing as well. Given the situation, that may or may not be the best use, but the option is always there to do so. Foresight. Increases defense by 20% for 20 seconds. The cooldown is 90 seconds. This is by far the weakest cooldown we have. The mitigation it provides is only about 6%ish, and it only works on physical damage. I use this to help soften auto attacks mostly. Do not rely on this cooldown. Most of the time when you use this, it actually won't change anything. In all honesty, sometimes I forget I even have it. The times I use this are when I am in Deliverance, because I think it benefits you the most during stancing periods when you aren't under the effect of Defiance. Bloodbath. Converts 25% of physical damage dealt into HP, lasts 30 seconds, and the cooldown is 90 seconds. The amount of self-healing this ability can provide is no joke. This move isn't exactly good on mechanic damage, but if used properly, the amount of HP that can be restored is banana sandwich. Pair this up with Berserk, watch the synergy blow through the roof, and go to Pound Town. It is a good town, trust me. Sharing the same cooldown timer with Zerk, and if used together, the results are awesome. Both cooldowns would be buffed, increasing their effectiveness. While you don't always have to do this, it is really beneficial. Bloodbath on its own can still be good when paired up with high strength, fell cleaves, and inner beasts. Alright, now I want to go into rotations. A warrior has 3 different combos. Storm's Eye is the damage combo, Storm's Path is the mitigation combo, and Butcher's Block is the aggro combo. 99% of the time, you want to keep up Storm's Eye 100% of the time. What? Does that even make sense? Let me explain. Eye is by far the strongest combo a warrior has. Keeping 100% uptime on this is very important. It not only increases your DPS, but the other tank and the ninja if there is one. This also lets the ninja do more Aeolian edges. Letting eye fall off is really bad, and if it happens, you should immediately put it back on. Path is amazing for stance dancing periods and mitigating big attacks or mechanics. I do not usually keep this up 100% of the time. I will use it aggressively given the encounter. Butcher's Block is your aggro combo. This also is your highest potency combo, and the reason why Warrior now has the highest aggro generation when trying to maximize damage. Watch your threat when using this combo, and never choose Block over Eye when trying to do damage. If Eye falls off, it will be less damage than using Block multiple times. People look at potencies and think that is the only factor when it comes to damage. This is far from the truth. A good priority system, or mentality to have, is something like this. Storm's Eye, then Fracture, if applicable. Then Block or Path, if mitigation is needed. Here is my main tank opening rotation. Now this opener may vary slightly from encounter to encounter. The reason is based around how soon mechanic damage is coming within the Berserk window. Take Ravana for example. I use Vengeance almost immediately because I need it for the Blinding Blade that comes so soon. Other times, I won't need any cooldown and can run as is. Sometimes, however, I'll switch back into Defiance when I'm pacified because I'll need to be in my tanking stance for high incoming damage. On occasion, I will use Inner Beast instead of Cleave as mechanic damage dictates, but usually Vengeance will be sufficient. As you can see, there is no set opener. However, the core of it remains intact that is universal. So depending on the encounter, you may need to modify it slightly to maximize your tanking and damaging abilities. Here is my off-tank rotation. You do 3 eye combos here because you are double fell cleaving and using fracture. If you use Butcher's Block, your eye will fall off, resulting in a 10% damage lost on the next Storm's Eye after the Berserk window, while only trading 20 total potency. So it is higher damage to do 3 eye combos. The last rotation I use is the triple dream cleave rotation. We're dreaming, boys, and in 3.0, it's better than ever. Unfortunately, I do not use this rotation very often because unable to do this, you must burn 2 amazing defensive cooldowns for stacks. However, in rare cases where you will be off tanking and not need these defensives for 2 minutes, then it is okay to do so. This is one of the multiple ways to accomplish 3 fell cleaves in one Berserk window. Again, I would like to reiterate that I do not use this very much. You will always want to save your defensives for when you tank because stance dancing will always be the highest damage output. There are a few different ways to accomplish triple fell cleaves in one single Berserk window. There is also a way to incorporate your potion for all 3 fell cleaves. However, to do this, you need to manually build up your stacks, which lowers your burst and you still have to burn your defensives. So in short, use this rarely, only when you're not going to be tanking anything for at least 2 minutes. For an AoE overpower rotation, try to get Maim up if you can by running through mobs and picking them up with heavy swing and Maim. Then position yourself appropriately, pop internal release and Berserk and go to Overpower town. Just overpower the living shit out of everything. When you're almost out of TP, Berserk or Maim, throw in some decimates and you'll be good to go. Now for some basic rotations and rules I use throughout the fight. I into block for damage, I into path for mitigation, and I into eye because need more eye. Fit fracture in when appropriate and always use Zerk before the 3rd hit of a combo, so that way you get in 3 full combos highest potency. If applicable, apply fracture, and if you apply fracture, only do Storm's eyes combos so it will not fall off. Save your Infuriate and internal release for your Berserk windows so you can always double fell cleave while Berserk is active. Only use these out of sync when the encounter dictates that all 3 will not be up 100% of the time. So for example, since internal release and Infuriate are only 60 seconds, and there will be a 30-second ahead of Berserk, but the next part of the encounter calls for 30 seconds of downtime, or time where using Berserk would not be effective. It is okay to burn these 2 cooldowns for damage because they will be back up in time, so you will get full uses out of them. Always use the stacks you gain from Berserk, Vengeance, and Raw Intuition. You will usually want to fell cleave or enter beast when it's up and not waste any stacks. But in rare cases, however, lining up IBs with mechanic damaging abilities is completely fine. When trying to mitigate damage as a warrior, there are so many different combinations you can use to accomplish this, it's unreal. The trick is to get every bit of usage out of your abilities. This will really put you over the top. Here are some ways, among many, to mitigate damage or self-heal. Raw Intuition into Inner Beast, Vengeance plus Bloodbath into Inner Beast, Thrill of Battle plus Convalescence, Inner Beast into Infuriate into Inner Beast, Holmgang plus Equilibrium, Inner Beast plus Equilibrium, Bloodbath plus Berserk into Inner Beast, Berserk plus Equilibrium, Thrill of Battle plus Inner Beast. Keep in mind, there are many other ways to mitigate or self-heal on a warrior. These are only a few examples of how to accomplish this. Now the last thing I want to go over is stance dancing. This is a technique that takes a lot of practice to perfect. It can be very difficult sometimes and takes really good judgment calls to maximize damage output while still being tanky. It is a lot easier to give up your tankiness than it is your DPS. So be careful when doing this. And remember, while you're capable of doing a lot of damage as a tank, there is a minimum amount of tankiness that you must adhere to. If you're going to tank in Deliverance, do your healers a favor. Use a cooldown to compensate for the lack of Defiance. You have no one to blame but your dumb self if you die while tanking in Deliverance without a cooldown going to compensate for Defiance. A couple good examples of doing this would be pairing Raw Intuition with Convalescence. Use the 5 Wrath stacks to Inner Beast before making the switch to Deliverance if needed, or simply use Vengeance while in Deliverance. Pair this with Bloodbath and Zerk and you have crazy high DPS while mitigating a massive amount of damage and self-healing. Remember that unlike Paladin or Dark Knight, unless you have stacks saved up, switching to Defiance does not give you instant tank status. You will need a heal to trigger Defiance, so in certain cases, after a cooldown ends, I would recommend switching to Defiance at 5 stacks, then using Inner Beast to heal the missing life that Defiance gives. Or, if you really want to fell cleave, you can switch to Defiance, then immediately use Equilibrium if needed to recover the extra HP. None of these are set in stone things to do. Stance dancing is about making good judgment calls. Using techniques like this will improve your damage while keeping your tanking capabilities active. After mechanic damage goes out, you will usually have time left on whatever cooldown you used. Take advantage of this time. In most cases, you can mitigate mechanic damage, then you can switch from Defiance to Deliverance because you do not need your tanking stance for auto attacks. Do this enough throughout the encounter and your DPS will be much higher, while maintaining all of your tanking capabilities when you need them. That brings me to the very core of stance dancing. The reason to do this at all is to fully utilize your tank and DPS capabilities at all times. If you do not feel comfortable doing this, then simply don't do it. But I highly recommend practicing this, and do not be afraid of dying. It's going to happen. Regardless if you're in Defiance or Deliverance, it's going to happen. But each time it does, you will learn and it will make you a better player. You will learn what you can and can't get away with, and I believe that is the key to stance dancing. Well, shit. We made it. That's all I got. I hope this guide was helpful and will lead to some high damage and awesome mitigation. Peace, guys.